So why do you think people undervalue themselves, and where does it come from in your view?
That's a really meaty question, right? It's sort of, I'm sure you've had guests that have talked about sort of the imposter syndrome and self-doubt. And I think, sometimes I think we're socialized to be that way, whether that's a cultural or a gender thing. And I think everybody has it. So it's interesting because I have people say to me every day, well, I bet that once you start working with people that are at a certain level, that goes away. And the secret is that it doesn't. So I work with some of the top executives at the biggest companies, and they still have that voice of doubt. So I think it's human. It's human to sort of worry about what people think and worry, what if somebody realizes I don't have all the answers? So it's really just about putting that framework around you that you know what you are good at, and then you know what you're not, so that you're not sort of pretending to know everything and be good at everything. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I was kind of half expecting you to go back to childhood.
Oh, I think it's probably more for a psychologist, Yeah.
But I also wanted to highlight something which I think is really interesting, which is a lot of people struggle with the concept of undervaluing themselves. But there are some people who don't seem to struggle with it at all. Like, they're more than happy to quote what they're worth, even if perhaps they're not even worth that. So have you got thoughts on that particular topic?
Yeah, so I guess let me ask you, so are you sort of talking about people that might give off sort of an air of just being really confident, and, they'll quote what seems to be almost an inflated price, but it seems like they're impervious to doubt?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because I feel like we've all met them. I've worked with those people, as we all have. And I actually wonder whether that's really the case, whether they really are impervious to self-doubt, because I think a lot of people are good at hiding it, which is great, right? You want to come across as confident and sure of yourself. I think, as I said, I've met and worked with some people who you would never expect to have doubt, but they hide it really well. Maybe they've done the work of processing that doubt and really connecting with their value. And then some people maybe just are very, very naturally confident. But I think putting that out there, right? You hear these stories, especially independent practitioners or consultants. That range of compensation is so huge that what should I charge? What should I ask for? And sometimes you seriously undervalue yourself. And then you realize the budget was much, much bigger, and you could have even doubled what you asked for. That's a whole other discussion, because how do you actually ask for compensation outside of sort of an organizational structure? That's a really hard one. And to do it in a really confident way. I think people who appear to be very confident many times deep down are not. But that, to me, sort of leads into another interesting topic, which is sort of leadership communication. And the people who I've noticed who are the most effective, the most confident, are frequently the people who don't say very much, right? The most powerful person in the room is frequently the one that listens the most and doesn't try and say the most, and doesn't try to convince people of their knowledge and of their sort of seniority. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. It reminds me of an example that we talked about before the call, and it was that you walked away from a big deal. Do you know what I mean? And can you give that example?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's sort of related also to the topic of leadership values and principles. And really, so when I talk about your value, I really mean two things. And I have a book coming out that really talks about knowing how you lead and knowing your leadership style and your leadership value. So one is, how do you lead? And the other is, why do you lead that way? And I think what's really critical is, a lot of people can say to you, well, I lead with empathy, I lead with compassion, I lead collaboratively. Those are great. And you'll be asked about those in interviews. I think what a lot of people don't spend time doing is saying, okay, why do I lead that way? What is so important to me about how I operate that I have a set of leadership principles, right? Operating principles. And to me, I think when you know that, it's really critical because then you know what your non-negotiables are, right? So for me, it's transparency, it's honesty, it's ethics and trust, and knowing that those underpin how I run my companies, how I choose my customers, my investors, the behaviors that I sort of allow or don't allow in my workplaces. What's really critical about that is that you then don't defend anything. So just like your value is a fact, your values are also a fact. And so, for example, I don't allow yelling in my workplace and my teams. I don't think it's a constructive way to do business. I think that's also how I lead my life. I don't yell in my personal life. Experimentation and curiosity are very important, especially in tech startups. And then another operating principle is just ethics and honesty. So if I'm not afraid to take things off the table, and that includes a deal, a customer deal, an investor deal, and walking away, taking something off the table in the past has cost me a huge amount of money, but I don't regret it because it means I'm staying in complete alignment with my leadership values. And a lot of the work that I do, whether it's one-on-one coaching or workshops with big companies, is helping people identify that so that they're leading without fear. They're not afraid of standing up and saying, this is one of my non-negotiables. And I'm going to stand up and say, this situation is not aligned.
Well, I think that, as you said, like determining what your values are, that's a very, a fruitful exercise to know what you want. But I think it requires some real integrity in order to sort of follow those, especially when you've got like a big deal going down. So I don't know, congratulations on that one is what I'd say, because it means that you mean it, in my view.
Yeah, I mean, otherwise you're a little bit toothless, right? You're sort of you're not putting your money where your mouth is. But I think it's operating from a place of fear. You're sort of thinking, this is the last chance I'm going to have. I'm never going to have another customer deal, or I'm never going to have another job. But these are the two flip sides, right? If you know your value, then you know that there is another job in the queue. There is another customer deal around the corner because your product is great, or whatever your situation. Nothing is fatal. And I think that's what I'm so passionate about, because if you can remove fear from that equation, then you can really operate very consistently and not afraid, right? And that's why I think knowing your value is so important, because you fill that vacuum of self-doubt.